Warriors Whiteboard Wednesday. I apologize for the acoustics. We are in the new dojo. However, ceiling tiles aren't up, anything like that, so the acoustics are going to be a little odd. So hopefully it's coming across okay, and you don't hear the same echo in your ears as I hear in mine. But we'll try to get through this so that we can keep the lessons flowing and everything moving in the right direction. Okay. So again, I want to focus on self-defense versus fighting. That's the key this week. But what we're really looking at here is differences, right? And to make sure that we're training for something that's very specific, right? So I'm going to start off by drawing some comparisons to look at differences when it comes to training for certain things. Okay, so it's always been my contention and the contention of a lot of folks that are in law enforcement, military, the self-defense realm, where we're talking about surviving unpredictable, sometimes uncontrollable things, but we still have to survive, right? And this common belief about fighting, okay, and what that means. So I'm going to dive into those kind of things, take a look at a couple of different ideas. We're going to look at 9 differences. We're going to take a look at a couple of points of confusion that really kind of muddy the waters and cause a lot of this problem where folks tend to see them as the same thing, right? Fighting is fighting, right? I mean, even in a self-defense situation, you're fighting for your life. But are you always, right? In all fights, are you fighting for your life? Is this a beat, break, kill paradigm? Is it a conquering dominance kind of thing? Or even if it's brutal, is it a contest? Okay, so we're going to take a look at some of these differences. And while there's a lot of gray area, there's a lot of bleed over, right? Where something is the same in both realms. I mean, ultimately a fight's a fight, just like a punch is a punch, a kick is a kick. See, now people start going, wow, see, but like in a style. Okay, but why? Why are those differences there? Okay, not just that they look different, not just that one's cool or one's powerful or what. Why are they different? Okay, like in ninjutsu and the classical arts that underpin this art, right? Why do we not do a lot of these pivoting on the ball of the foot, roundhouse kind of things like you see in Taekwondo, Tang Soo Do, a lot of those places? And it's not just a Japanese, Korean kind of thing, because we do have lateral shin, lateral knee kicks, but what we do with the base leg is very, very different. Why is that? Well, because of sandals or bare feet on muddy, bloody battlefields, things are a little bit different, right? Why straight plunging stomp kicks? Well, try to do a lateral shin kick to somebody like, wearing their body weight in armor. So you're going to kick lacquered wood or bamboo or metal with these kicks. Maybe, probably not, right? But so I am going to take a look at how what I'm going to be covering today is, for those of you who need it, right? It's absolutely based in tradition. We're going to take a look at the Shuhari model and where we actually are in that paradigm for this lesson. And then based on what we're covering here, I'm going to take a look at 3 training needs, which are not what most people think, right? Most people tend to think in terms of which specific techniques, which specific ryuha, we're not going to be in that realm, okay? All right, so again, self-defense versus fighting. The question is, what are you training for, okay? So again, welcome, right? If you haven't already done so, please make sure that you click like, subscribe, all that wonderful stuff, right? Get that out of the way. So this topic is going to make the difference, okay? And can make all the difference between surviving a potentially deadly situation and not making it out of that situation at all. And again, there's a lot of bleed over, so stay with me. You stay through the end, you'll get it. Hopefully, the comments that I get out of this from folks that watch the whole thing, that go through the entire lesson, they're not the same kind of comments that I routinely get where somebody wants to argue points, but it's obvious that they've only read the title of the lesson, they read the thumbnail, and maybe they watched, 2 minutes, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, whatever, before they got bored or their confirmation bias was satisfied, right? And then they throw a bunch of comments in that were answered, right? That were dealt with, or they skipped right over them. So again, we want to make sure that we're paying attention to what the lessons are, right? So for those of you who are in my law enforcement and military and special operator and those realms, right? I know you're not going anywhere. I know you're exactly where you need to be, okay? So I want you to think about something, okay? When you train, are you preparing for a quote unquote fight, like to win a fight, or are you preparing to survive? Be careful, because it's easy to answer yes in both directions, okay? This goes back to a story that I got very, very early on, like when I first started in the art. Hatsumi Sensei, my teacher, was discussing his first meeting with Takamasa Sensei, his teacher, 33rd Grandmaster of Togakukan School. And so Hatsumi Sensei admits, right, he was this young, brash, arrogant shit, right? Who, because of all of his training and because of all of his black belts and because of all this stuff, he met Takamasa Sensei with all this, you know, he's trying to lead with the how I'm going to be your best student, and like I want to learn this stuff because I've already learned all this other stuff, and I got this, and I got this, and I get this, and Takamasa Sensei sat there with a, you know, slight smile on his face, and he listened, nodding. When Hatsumi Sensei was finished, Takamasa Sensei said, yeah, that's all fine, but can you survive? What do you mean, can I survive? Survive what? I don't know. Okay? I understand that you can win things, you can win judo matches, you can win these things, but can you survive? Right? And that's not always in the realm of the physical. Okay? So even the masters make a difference between winning a match and being able to survive violence. Okay? And what the violence that we're talking about is very specific, right? So most traditional martial arts, and I use that word traditional loosely and lightly, because whenever somebody uses the word tradition or traditional, I want to know what era they're talking about, okay? Where are we, right? Edo, middle, early, late Edo period, Kamakura era, Sengoku Jidai Warring States period. What era, where did this tradition come from, okay? Was it something that was invented in the, 18th, 19th century, as opposed to when everybody carried swords on their hips, okay? Where did this come from? What lineage, what region, okay? Before we just kind of throw this thing around, okay? But most martial arts and combat sports, right? What I mean is competitive fighting, right? Are geared toward winning a fight, which sounds logical, right? Of course, in a fight, I want to be the winner. He gets to be a loser, I get to be the winner. Okay, so what if you do bit his ass? Any repercussions afterwards? Because it's not like fighting in a ring, right? You win, there's a winner, there's a loser, whatever. Chances are his family isn't coming back with a whole bunch of freaking guns or pitchforks or whatever to wipe out you and your family. There's a whole lot of considerations in self-defense and survival training we don't have to worry about. And people often miss that because, well, that looks logical and it looks right. And it's what everybody else is doing. So, okay? But the idea here is that real world self-defense is about surviving. It's about surviving the encounter and escaping unharmed or with the least amount of wear and tear on us possible. Okay? There's no mutual death. There is no tie. There is no, it doesn't work that way. Okay? And this is a huge distinction. It's a huge difference, right? And that's the point of what we're going to explore today. Okay? So again, you don't have to do it now, but afterwards, right? Don't forget, like, share, all that wonderful stuff, right? So in this session, we're going to take a look at, what do we have here? 12 considerations, right? 12 critical differences. To make the most comparison over here, but this is where confusion can lie, right? So let's round it out to 12, okay? And the differences are between mindset, tactics, and approaches between conventional fighting in a controlled environment, even a street fight, okay? Think about how controlled that is. People move out to the middle of the street, or they move to the middle of the parking lot, lots of space around them. People gather, so there's a general space to work in, that kind of thing, right? Versus surviving a real world attack that can be highly unpredictable and often uncontrollable. Right? There's a Japanese saying, shikata ganai, right? There's nothing you can do about it, right? We'll talk about this as one of these factors here in a conventional fight, right? Sport fight, whatever. I don't care if it's two bulls, bumping shoulders in high school or at work or whatever, and agreeing to meet in the parking lot afterwards. I know when the fight's going to happen. I know who it's going to be up against. I know where it's going to be, right? I can already start pre-planning things, right? Sport fights, even more so, right? Diet, exercise, watching videos of this person fight before. There's all kinds of things, okay? So what are some of these core differences between fighting and survival, right? So I just talked about one of these, right? And that's, your opponent, right? Conventional fight, your opponent. Even if you just met him and you started pushing and shoving or calling each other's moms names or whatever, you know who they are, okay? Now, I would be really, really careful in those kind of situations where you're not in a ring or you're not in an organized kind of thing, because some of you may have already experienced this. You could think you're dealing with this guy, and his friends could leave you alone until he starts losing, and then next thing you know, 1, 2, 3, whatever, show up, right? Or it could just start out in a bad way, okay? So again, sports or these everyday fights, I'm going to call them fair fights, because there's some really odd, unwritten cultural or social rules that even the tough guys on the street tend to follow, okay? If you've ever been in one of these things and you take up a martial arts posture, right? One of these guys might, say something about like, no cheating chink shit or whatever, right? Okay. Just quoting words, right? But there's this sense of I'd have kicked his ass if he wouldn't have cheated or whatever, okay? There's this concept of fair and cheating, what's allowed, what's not allowed, that kind of thing, okay? So in a match, you often know your opponent, right? You've seen their style, their body language, and perhaps even their strengths and weaknesses from prior encounters, whether they were with you or with somebody else. Okay, you got some information, right? You get some information. In real self-defense situations, what I mean by that is survival kind of stuff, right? In contrast, you often know nothing, right, about the attacker, right? They could be anyone. They could be a stranger. They could be someone just who's angry, came, knocking out of slamming out of a door or whatever, bump into you. You just happen to be standing there. Next thing you know, you're the target of aggression, whatever. They could have woken up this morning, pissed at the world, looking for somebody to beat, break, or kill. Right? And then they've got whatever their criteria is, that kind of thing. Right? So again, they could be under the influence of drugs, alcohol. Hell, you could be under the influence of drugs and alcohol. Right? Not making any value judgments, but a lot of people go out partying and they give no consideration to the degree of vulnerability or the advantages they're giving up, the more they partake, okay? Or, they're out of the party and they're so involved in the fun, and the more tunnel vision they get, okay? It's very, very different, okay? So one of the first things that one of my first teachers in this art, nobody else ever addressed these things. One of the first things they asked, it was kind of a pop quiz in between techniques in a class, and they asked a question. They said, what do you not know about your attacker? Wait, what? Okay. What do you not know about your attacker? Okay. What do you know? Okay. Well, I know how, just if he just showed up, right? I know how tall he is. I know what he's wearing, those kind of things. Great, okay? So we can discern those, right? What do I not know about him? I know he wants to hurt me. There he is, okay? What do I not know? Okay? We'll talk about this one farther on, but as a little heads up, okay? I don't know what kind of experience he has. I don't know how far he's willing to go. Okay, so there's a couple of these things that are going to pop up that hopefully will get some light bulbs to go on. All right. So again, one of the biggest shocks to people is they've trained and they're either training against some vague idea of an attacker who is less skilled than them, who will be absolutely surprised, who's untrained, that kind of thing. Some of the most untrained people are some of the most dangerous because they're not trying to conform to any kind of official fight mechanism. Okay, gangbangers, whatever. They got their knowledge by not, dying in gang wars and shit like that, right? So they school hard knocks, literally. Okay. All right. So next, I've already talked about some of these, so we'll get those out of the way, right? Time and place of the encounter. Right? Time and place of the attack. Okay. In sport, we already determined that, right? These two posters are made, right? These two are scheduled to fight, right? And so they've got lots of time. Information gathering, training in the gym, reaction drills, right? All kinds of stuff. As I mentioned this during this week's Kuden podcast on Monday, that what happens if one of the fighters, even some of these, like, the two bulls they don't like each other and they finally decide they're going to like square off, in the parking lot or whatever. What happens if one of them gets injured or ill or there's a family emergency or whatever before the fight happens? Gets rescheduled, gets postponed, might even just go away altogether, right? But it's been my experience as an ex-federal cop that bad guys love situations like that because it's a predator-prey paradigm, not a let's see who's better paradigm. Okay, they don't give a shit, right? I'm going to talk about these guys today. I don't talk about them very often, okay? But killers and serial killers, right? Assassins, okay? With all the evidence in the world about different types of threats that we could face, and most of them are on primetime TV, or if you're a Netflix binger or whatever, the number of people, friends of mine included, who watch investigation discovery or these real crime kind of things where they spell out this whole how these things happened and whatnot, and then they never allow that to seep into the dojo for training. But they all involve people that have pre-planned to set things up so that even the tough guy, right, is put in a really, really bad situation. Okay. All right. So time and place. Okay. Again, we know this, right? Fight happens on a pre-arranged date, controlled environment, mat, ring, dojo, whatever. Right. A real self-defense situation can happen anytime, anywhere. Right. One of the things that I teach in both the dojo and when I'm doing workplace violence consulting for corporations is discussing the difference between this whole violence paradigm, right? So it's different for the victim than it is for the attacker, okay? We like to say, oh, he just snapped, right? Just came out of nowhere. One, nothing comes out of nowhere, and two, no one ever just snaps. Okay? There have been signs and signals and whatnot, right? They're either mentally unstable and everybody knows it, or they've got anger management issues and everybody knows it. They've made threats, or they've mumbled under their breath or whatever. Okay, I promise you that even if these people haven't marked it out, pen on paper or on a whiteboard or whatever to plan their attack, right? They've thought about one of these days, and that day I'm going to. Okay, so. For the victim, violence is random. We never know when it's going to happen, how many attackers, what kind of attack, what the environment's going to be like, a whole lot of things. Okay? The only thing we're going to know is the emotional state that we're in, and the skill sets that we should be able to trust with our life. not the cool ones that we like, the ones that we know. I can do it in my sleep. I can do it without thinking about it. I trust my life to those skills. Okay? But to an attacker, violence is rarely, if ever, random. Even if it's just in the moments leading up to it. Right? But muggers, they got up that morning. That's what they do. They steal from people, they mug, whatever. Okay? Assassins, all this kind of stuff, right? So for them, it's rarely ever random. So we're already way behind. As the victim or the target of violence, we're already way behind. Nowhere close to like fair fights, sports, whatever. Okay? Next one, okay? Again, another one that I've already covered, right? The ability to train and prepare. Okay? What I mean by this, and we'll get to another one that's down here, right? We have the ability to train for the fight we're going to be in. And we can limit everything to that. So if it's a boxing match, then we're going to train for powerful punches, hooks, jabs, combinations, those kind of things. If it's kickboxing, if it's jiu-jitsu, whatever, we're going to train for those things. One of the reasons that ninjutsu, my contention has always been, ninjutsu has been the original mixed martial art, long before mixed martial arts was a gleam in somebody's eye, right? It's because of all the options and all of the avenues and sub-arts that are involved. Because the understanding was, I don't know what the mission's going to be. I don't know where I might end up. I don't know what the terrain's going to be. I don't know what plan B through Z has to be. Nothing like that. Okay. So there's a need for a broader approach, right? But there's also the ability, there's preparation time. Okay. Preparation time. Right. Next one is rules and technique focus. I just mentioned this. Rules, technique focus. What I mean by the technique focus and stuff is that if it's a jiu-jitsu thing, we're either going to start there or we're going to start standing knowing that the idea is a submission on the ground. Okay? Boxing, it's boxing, whatever, kick fighting, whatever it is, right? So there's a bunch of rules, okay? It's always confused me that in an MMA match, like you can't hammer the shit out of the back of somebody's skull because you might kill him. But I can mount him with him on his back on the ground and punch his face, driving the back of his head into the mat. And that's okay. But either way, rules are rules. Okay? You know, most people are younger than when this stuff got started. And like when this stuff, when Royce Gracie developed the whole UFC, MMA kind of thing, there were only 3 rules. You couldn't bite, you couldn't gouge somebody in the eye, and you couldn't kick them in the groin. And if you did, you only got penalized, right? Like in certain matches, let's say the check was $25,000 like it was in UFC 3, okay? If you did any one of those things, it was a $1,000 fine. Shit, I'll gouge you in the eye, bite you, and kick you in the nuts, give me my $22,000, I'm gonna go home, right? But now, there's a list of, 35 or whatever, and it's not really 35 because you look at some of the lines, like you can't do pressure point attacks. You can't, there's so many things you can't do. Okay. So it's been my experience in the street. They can do anything they want. Okay. And if we're talking about some of these other ones that are really, really bad, okay, or the guy with vengeance and really wants to get you, okay, everything changes. Okay. So again, sport fights, even the fair fights on the street, they're governed by rules. Okay. Certain techniques are allowed, others are prohibited, whatever. Okay. This is the difference, right? People like to say no rules on the street, no rules on the street, but they still confine their training to things that they won't do or they won't train to do or they're not even going to look at and prepare for because, well, what's the chance of that happening? I don't know. But I'd rather have the skills to handle it and not need them than to not have them and be face to face with the guy that has a gun in my mouth. Okay. All right. So next, there's the gun in the mouth thing, right? Use of weapons. All right. When was the last time you saw a fair fight or a sport fight? The weapons were involved, and I don't mean SCA stuff. You know, Society for Creative Anachronism, where people dress up like medieval fighters with with foam weapons and whatnot. And it's cool looking. I absolutely agree. One year, I was actually hired to go to an SCA event to teach samurai sword. And so, yes, we still had to use padded things and whatnot, but we're teaching strategy, right? We're going to tag the hands. We're going to go for these other, and they had certain rules that if certain parts of the body got hit, these guys just fought right through it because, like, it didn't take them out of the fight. Okay? But if we think about this, if you're sparring, let's say you're doing sparring with swords, okay, and you do the padding thing and all that, and you get tagged on a wrist or mid-forearm or whatever, you should fold your arm and then only, at best, be able to operate with your upper arm. Okay? If you get tagged in a different place, then that arm should hang dead. Okay? And it should also let go of the weapon. Okay? But people tend to not do that because, well, it's a game. And they're not registering what would really be happening. What are the consequences of getting tagged a certain way? Okay? If we get tagged in certain places, right? And again, even they had rules. And so this class I got paid, but it was a shit show because everybody had their way of doing things. And I was there to teach, like, this is the sword stuff, right? Okay. Somebody sent me a video the other day that had people sparring in a dojo, and one was dressed up in kind of medieval type armor with a broadsword, and the other one was in kendo armor with a katana, and they were blades. I'm assuming they were unsharpened blades or whatever. But it looked like something out of a fucking Robin Hood movie where they were clashing blades. Holy shit. A katana is not built to take this clashing against a katana, let alone a broadsword, right? Like a Scottish broadsword. That's just dumber than shit, right? But it was obvious that the teacher that was letting it happen, the students, nobody learned anything about the weapons themselves. No matter what the techniques were, as soon as it went to sparring, it turned into a fucking fantasy movie, right? It's just ridiculous. Just my humble opinion. Right? Anyway, what do we have next? Okay, let's see. Next is physical condition of the participants. Okay? Physical conditioning. I already mentioned this, right? You got plenty of time to get ready for that fight. You're not going to. The number of people that years ago, lots of people have followed me for over a decade. The person they were and the way they explained things 10 years ago. Nobody can call my mom a name, my wife a name, my sister a name. There's a moral imperative. I gotta do. I can't help myself. Okay? And now what they're saying online is, well, see, as I've gotten older and everything, like, I got to make sure I speak right. I don't get involved in those kind of things. I talk my way out of things. And where the hell was that when you could have died in one of these little jackass fights that you were willing to put yourself into? Okay. So lots of physical conditioning. A lot of these people, even the bulls in the bar or whatever, right? If they're not feeling their best, if they're not up to it, if they're fighting a cold, whatever, they're not as willing to jump into shit, right? Same thing. The organized fights, right? As soon as things go sideways, they get ill, they get injured, whatever, just postpone the fight, okay? Because it wouldn't be fair to fight somebody who was at a disadvantage, okay? That's not the way killers think. It's not the way muggers think. They're absolutely fucking ecstatic if you're not at your best or that you're older, right? People keep liking to point out the fat old bald guy, okay? Except who's more likely to be a target of, well, serial killers, they all have their types, right? But the one who's looking to get the jump on somebody and that they're going to make assumptions based on size and build and all that, who's more likely, right? The guy with the 12-pack abs and, the wannabe alpha attitude. I say wannabe because true alphas that I've known in my life, they don't bark like dogs, right? They don't run around doing the bully kind of thing. They're very quiet and whatnot. When they walk into a room, the alpha wannabes have a seat, right? So everybody can just feel it, right? But everything changes, right? Everything changes. So, you know, in the world of fair fights, right? Wouldn't hit a guy with glasses, would you? Yeah, I absolutely would. Right? It's not a fair fight. I don't get involved in that bullshit. Right? Somebody's coming at me. I've already tried to de-escalate. And if they got the jump on me, well, they got the jump on me. But I don't get involved in those kind of things because I don't need to win fights to justify my existence or to make my ego feel good or whatever. Okay. And so if you have forced me into a position, not you, because you guys are all enlightened, but if someone has forced me into a situation where I have no choice, not my fault that they didn't take them off. Okay. But I am going to exploit that. Okay. Because glasses will tear somebody up. Okay. If nothing else, I will give them the biggest pair of freaking contact lenses that they've ever not wanted to wear. All right. So physical conditioning. Right. Let's do 3 more. Right. So fair fights, conventional fights. I'll talk about this more here in a bit. Organized fights, those kind of things, right? They typically start where you're squared up, right? What you have is end to end, right? That's nose to nose, right? Toe to toe. Fight this way, okay? But in an attack survival situation, the attacker can come from any angle. Right? You don't know which direction they're going to come from. As a matter of fact, it's in their best interest to blindside your ass, okay? To get you before you're ready. We've been talking about that for the last 2 weeks. Okay? But conventional sport fights start nose to nose, toe to toe. It doesn't matter if it's going to the ground or not. Okay? And if the person does get turned around and maybe you get a shot to the back of their head or whatever, first thing that happens is what? Ref steps in, or even a bystander. People might start yelling, dude, whatever. Okay? Yeah. So again, we've got to be really, really careful. Okay? Training for survival, training for self-defense. And these are not just my words. These are Hatsumi Sensei's words, Ishizuka Sensei's words, Tanamura Sensei's words, Noguchi, whatever. Okay? For those of you in the Bujinkan, you know these names. Self-defense and survival is training for the unexpected, which sounds kind of counterintuitive. Like, expect the unexpected. What the hell does that mean? Right? I don't know where things are going to come from. Okay? So I need to prepare for the things, even the things I can't prepare for. Okay? In last night's class, and as a part of this week, we started with people, the whole flinch response, where most people train to go into nice kama, everything's controlled or whatever. Okay? Imagine getting punched in the face or stabbed or whatever by your best friend or somebody, loved one, whatever, who, this is an act of betrayal. So it's coming, or they haul off their fist, right? How many people that you know in your life that you are pretty sure of? And so if they went, ooh, I'm going to hit you, right? Or threatened to hit you, you would just instinctively, automatically not take them seriously. So where would your head be when they actually threw the punch? No matter how good your skills are. Okay? Or you got hit, or you got stabbed, and you turn and look. Now, where would your willingness to continue be? If it was the person that you would never hurt, you would protect with your life, with your dying breath, but they're the ones who did it. Okay? Again, watch these crime shows. This is not a possibility that's so far-fetched, right? Happens all the time. As an ex-cop, I can tell you this kind of shit is normal, right? The problem with a lot of people in the self-defense and martial arts world is they don't live in areas and regions where their normal matches the monsters I'm talking about. Right? Same thing with the reason I get way more attaboy kind of emails and messages from law enforcement, especially professional armed security, military, special operators, and those kind of things, is because they live it all the time. and fantasy shit, they can see it immediately, or they can see if somebody's talking, right? So typically squared up, right? So in most fights, facing your opponent squarely, right? In ninjutsu, if we're doing that, there's something that we're doing or controlling, or in all honesty, we're sacrificing so that somebody has time to get away or whatever. Because in ninjutsu, all engagement is indirect, it's off, okay? So I know when people first learn their techniques, they first learn their defenses. Their partner is straight across from them, you're working with one line and all that, okay? But the influence of the Takagi Yoshin view, again, for those of you in the Budokan, the influence of the Takagi Yoshin view and one or two of the other systems that typically are ninjutsu, right? Everything happens off of an ikichigai setup. Ikichigai means to pass by. And so it's like an assassination technique. It's like this last second kind of thing. So the attack happens diagonally or at some off angle because you're entering in to jam up their ability to get the weapons at the same time you're attacking them. And you're entering in off their center line and their power triangle, right? Their body doesn't work well that way, okay? So are we training that way? I don't know, okay? Let's see. Again, the attacker could be beside, whatever. We'll expand on this here in just a second, right? So fights, even the bar fights and whatnot, right? Fights usually end, right? End with a knockdown, a knockout, or a surrender. Person taps out. Whoa, I've had enough. Shit. You win. Okay? It's been my experience that in survival situations, fight's over when he's done, not when you're done. Okay? When you're training for self-defense, when you're training for survival, you have to know that if you get too dizzy or the lights are going out or they go out, he can do anything to you and or your loved ones he wants after that point. Okay? You will be extremely lucky if he just walks away with a smug smile like he won something. It's not the way it works. Okay? And let's see, my last one here is starting position. Starting position. Conventional fights, start standing. Okay? Real world self-defense. Okay? You could be standing, sitting, lying down. If you're lying down, are you on your back? Are you on your stomach? Are you on your side? Which side, right? Are you laying on an arm, right? What position are your legs in? That kind of thing. What else I have in here? I wanted to make sure I didn't leave out, okay? Just about any position, right? At home, in bed, right? Which is not the same as trying to get up off of a regular floor because your mattress gives those kind of things, right? Being on a sofa, couch, love seat, beanbag chair, whatever, right? They tend to limit your ability to move freely, okay? The attack could happen during a casual conversation, right? The attack could happen through an open car window. Okay? Got a little quick story here. Military cop stationed at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, a bunch of years ago. And at that point, I was working at the MP station. I was a dispatcher and a criminal computer operator. So I'd taken some time off the street. I needed to detox because I was beginning to see all human beings as potential criminals. I just needed to wait long enough for them to do something wrong. Okay? It's a fucked up mentality, but you have to remember, unless I was with family or sleeping or whatever, that was my life, right? Dealing with people that were over the age of 18 and couldn't control themselves, right? So I took time off, detox and all that. And at this one point, my car was in the shop, or my ex-wife had the car. Doesn't really matter. I didn't have a car, and I was getting a ride home with one of the oncoming patrols. And we no sooner hopped in the car than there was a there was a call to go to a different housing area that I lived in on post, that there was a call, argument, gun involved, shots fired kind of thing, right? We show up and there's nobody, right? We're looking around, there's like 3-4 units, right? 6-7 of us, right? We're looking around, nothing, lights, and it's just like, when you turn the lights on, the cockroaches, scurry. But turned around and I'm walking back to the cruiser, because I'm like, I don't even have a gun belt on or anything like that. I'm working at the station, right? And I'm now off duty, and I'm walking by, and I walk by this one car. Now it's summertime, so back then, windows down, there's no big deal, right? I walk by and I hear this gurgling noise. I turn around, there's a guy sitting in a car, still. That's at night, right? He's sitting in the car, he's still, and it's like he's trying to say something, but again, based on experience, I don't know if he's screwing around, whatever, right? And we're talking to him, we're trying to get an answer back. Sometimes he's making noise, sometimes he isn't. And then partner comes over, hits a flashlight, torch for those of you in a different country, right? And shines it in, and he's got a gunshot wound right through his chest. Still up, still awake, but he's fading fast. Okay? I don't know. I didn't stick with the investigation after that or whatever, but there was no scuffle. This guy was sitting upright like he had gotten into his car to start the car and whatnot. And from the front of the car, the angle of the shot was this way, right? He was attacked through. But lots of people, right? The first attack before they're drug out of the car or whatever is that they are punched, stabbed, or whatever through that open window. Are we practicing for that? Okay. Well, we don't have any copter for that. Yeah, no shit. But now what do we do? Okay. So there's 9 just to get it started, right? 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, right? So just differences, right? So again, the question is, what are we training for? Okay? What are you training for? Right? So let's take a look at 3 points of confusion that can cause people to see these 2 things that way. That's an equal sign. Okay? They're not. However, okay? In this situation, you've got 2 or more combatants. They all agree to be there, and they're all fighting for the same prize. Bragging rights, husband and wife, what color the curtains are. Typically, the husband doesn't give a shit what color the curtains are going to be, whatever. But they're fighting for the same prize. The girl on Saturday night, bar, whatever. Okay? In a self-defense situation, you've got 2 or more combatants, and at least one of them didn't want to be there, doesn't want to be there, didn't plan to be there, and doesn't want to win anything other than their freedom. They just want to get the hell out and get home, tuck their kids in bed, and not want to ever think about it ever again. Okay? Not the same. Not the same. Okay? Might this guy use fighting techniques? Yeah. But the reason, the why, is different. Okay? So 3 points of confusion. That's not one of them. Okay? That was the preview. Okay? First one. Street fights, bar fights, whatever, often mimic sport fights. Bump shoulders. Yeah, they mimic that. Why? Because in lieu of any other training, when we see things, sport fights, movie fights, those kind of things, that shit gets stored in subconscious memory, subconscious storehouse. And then when we need things like that, we will, that's what comes forward because it's all we know. Right? It becomes the default, right? So again, in many street fights, not all, right? Not all. I mean, if you look at movies, you can see the martial art of the day or of the era move through movies that were made at certain times, right? I remember in the 80s, late 70s, 80s, and maybe even in the early 90s, movies, even freaking sci-fi movies, had aliens and shit throwing Taekwondo kicks. Some of you probably remember that kind of stuff, right? Cheesy movies, whatever. Fights look like that kind of thing. But if you go back to the old black and whites, fights, like somebody cold cock somebody and then dive on them, right? They tackle each other, go over the couch, hit the ground, rolling around, trying to punch each other in the ribs or the head. A gun would come out. I mean, things were way, way closer. But with the introduction of martial arts into Western culture, things got more away from that, unless it was like a slasher movie or serial killer, whatever. The fight is more contrived, more martial art like. Okay, interesting, right? But this influences things. Okay, so again, they tend to mimic what people have seen in sports and movies, whatever. They square up, they throw punches, they try to win in a traditional sense. Okay, and in a way, they follow an unspoken social rule book, right? That looks somewhat like a sport fight. Okay, real criminal attacks, the guys I'm talking about, criminal, serial killers, whatever. These individuals don't care about fighting fair from the get-go. There's no fair, there's no nothing, right? There's no yelling at you. A lot of people train like the bad guy is going to yell at them from across the street. 2 minutes, I'm coming, right? What the hell's that, right? So they're not going to fight in a fair way. They're not going to fight in an honorable way, nothing like that, right? Their aim isn't to win a contest, right? It's to dominate, it's to harm, it's to kill, right? Even criminals in muggings and whatnot, right? One of the things that was introduced to me way early in my training in this art was when we were talking about we don't know what the attacker's up to, how far they're willing to go, right? This was something that ran parallel to things when I was a uniform patrol cop, where traffic stops and domestic disturbances are like the deadliest scenarios for cops. Traffic stops, really, really bad, right? Because I could be pulling somebody over because they ran a stop sign or taillights out, who knows, right? But if this guy just robbed a bank, he might in his head be thinking, shit, and might shoot me right there where he could have just taken the ticket, fucking drove off because he didn't know. But in my head, I'm pulling this guy over for a ticketable infraction, and he thinks that I'm going to be sending him off to prison. Same thing in mugging, same things in, butting up against somebody. So this guy's got anger management problems, but maybe he did a stint and he's really, really close to being a 3 strikes and you're out kind of guy. And he's not going back to jail. So you can't identify him. You can, right? He's going to be a different type of fighter, a different type of attacker, even though it started off as what looked like a bar fight to you. Not going to be the same. Okay. We don't know what's going on in their head. We don't know what the life situation is like. One of the big things in law enforcement is suicide by cop. Somebody can't pull the trigger themselves, so they'll set up a scenario so the cops take them out. Okay. Happened recently, within the last couple of years, locally here for us. Somebody did what looked like a workplace violence situation, and marriage fell apart, was losing the kids, all kinds of things, and set things up as a hostage situation. Wasn't intending on hurting them, but would have shot one just so the cops pulled the trigger. Right? So, weird stuff, right? Okay. So again, right? This isn't about winning or losing. These folks, not these folks. Sorry. Where am I? Street fights mimicking. Yeah. So the real criminal attackers and whatnot, right? This may be about inflicting pain. It may be about terror. It might be. It's anything but winning a fight. Okay. All right. Next, right, is the mindset of criminal attackers. So what I have. Make sure I didn't jump ahead of myself here. Yeah. Okay. So the mindset of criminal attackers. We already started to bleed over into that, right? Mindset of criminal attackers. Not fair fights, not, okay? So is there anything extra I put in here? In street fights, in organized fights, whatever, both participants often have some level of awareness, right? And control, okay? Fights usually driven by emotions, anger, pride, defensive honor, whatever, right? And there's often a chance for one or both parties to step back, reassess their life choices, and de-escalate, right? Decide they've had enough after the first punch, whatever, okay? In contrast, criminals, especially those with violent intent, are emotionally detached from the fight. They're emotionally detached from the attack. Their goal is about domination. Their goal is about inducing that panic, that terror, that kind of thing, right? Whether it's a mugging, whether it's an assault, whether it's a predatory attack, criminals' focus, again, isn't on fair engagement, right? They're more likely to strike without warning, and they're more likely to use either a weapon that they brought with them or a weapon of opportunity, right, that just happens to be there, right? And things will escalate very quickly when you start to present resistance and a defense, okay? Because it's not about winning or losing, right? For a lot of them, serial killers, some of these guys, this is a challenge. It's like hunting. It's exactly like hunting, right? All right. And then we talked about this earlier, the unpredictability of violence. All right. So for the target, for the victim, right? For us, violence it's random. It's unpredictable, right? So we never know. What that means is we never know when it's going to happen, right? So we should be practicing Zanshin all the time, not just in the dojo, right? Zanshin, lingering awareness, right? We should be unpredictable. We don't know what kind of location, right? What kind of environment we're going to be in. Between parked cars. During Kuden, I mentioned there were 4 things that I discussed about real situations, and that is that they happen fast. And I don't mean just the attack, right? The punches, the stabs, those kind of things. I mean how they close in when it happens very, very quickly, right? And you got to get your wits about you and reestablish equilibrium real fast, right? Weapons could come out, multiple attackers could happen, right? When was the last time you saw a multiple attacker other than like a professional wrestling kind of thing where it was some big guy against a couple of midgets? I know you can't use those words anymore. Little people, or whatever, right? So no, I mean, a lot of these criminals are pack animals, right? And so it's a predator-prey situation, okay? So again, unpredictability, right? So here, again, relatively predictable. Even if it happens fast, push, shove, and then next thing you know, they're into it, right? But here, there's no telling what your attacker is capable or willing to do, right? They may escalate. Suddenly, an argument turns into a weapon being drawn, a robbery turns violent, or they decide to finish what they started with lethal force, right? Not going back to prison, or they realize that you saw the face and whatever, okay? There's no room for guessing or reacting according to known techniques or technique scenarios, okay? And this is where we need to kind of step away from things, right? Step away from things. So before we talk about the training needs here and kind of wrap this up, I want to make sure that we all understand that this is based in tradition, right? One of those traditional training models. I don't know if there's, yeah, you should see that on there, right? Got light glare. Okay, so we have this traditional training model, Shuhari. And how many people? A lot of people talk about it, but I don't know how many people actually have it wired into their training. Okay, so Shu, right? Not the things that go on your feet, right? This is not hand. The kanji for this, Shu, is the kanji that means to copy or preserve. Okay, so here it's kata training, right? Do the kata, do it. No henkas allowed, no variation, nothing like that. The goal here is to be able to duplicate your teacher's movement. You're doing it exactly the way your teacher would do it, given some body differences and things like that, right? So it's to copy, it's to preserve the art, that kind of thing. But you learn the technique so you can learn the lessons embodied by the technique, okay? And then we go to ha, right? Nobody's laughing at you, right? This kanji for ha is break, to break, right? So what we're doing here now, this is where variation comes in. There's a whole bunch of things where we're breaking these things up. We're running it through like situational things, encounters or whatever, okay? So, but this is going to take you to a point where you're really good at taijutsu. You're really good at the art, okay? And, you know, you're good at the kamae, you're good at all these things, right? And Mikyo, we have this as well, right? There's 10 levels of progression. All this stuff runs out at level 9. Level 10, everything changes, right? So this right here, right? This means to transcend the art. As a matter of fact, this week's Friday masterclass, right, is focused on transcending the art, the models and the way people make variations off those models so that we can actually do what we need to do. And we're confined by ignorance, right? We're learning how to do things in a much more scientific, much more effective way, right? But here, all of this, right? Trying to move beyond into all of this unpredictability that I talk about, right? What we're going to be chained by is arrogance and ego and all that kind of stuff, because we're going to try to do things the official way, the right way, whatever, right? Hatsumi Sensei talks about this, and I drew a circle around this because he talks about returning to zero, okay? In the beginning, I didn't know anything, and you know, people that are untrained or even white belts are willing to do anything in a self-defense situation to save themselves because they don't have a whole bunch of techniques. But the more techniques that somebody learns, the more conditioned they get, and that subconsciously as well, to do things a very specific way. Okay? In sword fighting, we talk about how it's easier to defend against a trained swordsman than it is the person who picked up that sword and is swinging it like somebody with a machete at the jungle, or you know, somebody swinging an axe wildly or whatever. Okay, because one person's predictable and the other one isn't. Okay, so we need to get to a point where we can transcend this. This is not the same as what a bunch of jackwagons did early in the day, where Hatsumi Sensei was teaching on this stuff. So what they did was they went, well, I'll just do that. Except they didn't learn all the lessons that this was supposed to teach. How do you transcend something that you didn't know how to do anyway? Well, Sensei said, forget the kata. Yeah, he wasn't talking to you. He was talking to the person who was now being trapped by the kata or by the form or the art or whatever, right? Okay, throwaway technique, okay? Not talking to you if you haven't learned the technique yet, right? Throw it away because it's in the way, right? What he's talking about is at a certain point, this shit gets in the way, right? So in the beginning, you knew nothing. You learn all this stuff and you start seeing things differently. But a master of the art, everybody wants to move like Hatsumi Sensei, but they miss all this. He's transcended the need for using ichimonji and other kamae and whatnot because he's mastered timing, distancing, and angling. That guy can't get him anyway, so he doesn't need to position his body to remove his targets and all that. He can present them, but the guy can't get him anyway. Okay? It's a matter of skill and perspective and mindset, internalized in muscle memory. We own it because we're operating at the principle and concept level, not at the technique level. It's very different, okay? So what do we need to do to get from here across this chasm here to be able to deal with what we've been talking about, okay? I'm going to give you 3 things today, right? First, well, I'll keep it random, right? First thing, create drills that fill in the experiential side, right? So create, borrow, invent, whatever, drills, right? What do I have here? That, yeah, fill in, right? That fill in, I'll just put gaps, fill in the gaps, right? Okay, there's gaps between the models and the variations and stuff that sparring does a little bit, right? It's about commitment. It's about being able to like make decisions under pressure and all that kind of stuff. Practice your distance, timing, and angling, and all that kind of stuff, right? But when people spar, don't they spar like a sport fight? Toe to toe, nose to nose, whatever, okay? But there's lots of things we could do, like putting ourselves in a situation. One of the models we did with the upper level people last night is we put them in the middle of a circle, and the people around them in the circle, right, could start calling them names and create a whole bunch of confusion, little jerky movements like they were the one that was going to come, but only one person in that group was going to initiate the attack, and they needed to practice keeping their head straight and not getting overwhelmed or feeling the need to have comeback statements or whatever, so that they could have a better chance of recognizing the attack as it came and dealing with that person. Everybody else's job was to feint attacks and to create mental cloudiness and to confuse and all that, you know, all that unfair shit. Okay. Yeah. Overwhelm. It's all the stuff that control freaks like to stay away from. And martial artists and fighters, yeah, we're fucking control freaks. Okay. So how about if we put our control freak on training properly so that we have more control than to control the training so we never have to do anything that would scare the shit out of us. Okay, maybe. I don't know. Maybe. Okay. Second thing is, let's see. Create drills. Oh, yeah. Sorry. Do some research so you can understand criminal mindset. Unless you're a criminal, and even if you are, you think differently than other types of criminals, right? If you're not a criminal, never been one, you have no idea what's going on inside their head. So you need to do some research, okay? Instead of saying, I practice martial arts, I study ninjutsu, I whatever, how about if we become students of conflict and violence? What causes it? How does it manifest? How does it escalate? Those kind of things, right? Where does it come from? Okay, just like personality type is tied to someone's attraction to specific martial arts. Their personality, what they're willing to do, their belief about their physical prowess or their relationship to pain, or what they're willing to do to another human being or whatever, determines whether that person goes into MMA, goes into karate, kung fu, judo, whatever, right? That's pretty cool. From a ninja standpoint, seeing what people do in the world, what their college degree's in or not, what their vocation is, whatever, right? Now, it's not, any one of those things is not a clear and sole indicator, but you start to recognize whether, like if somebody's not working in the realm that they got the degree in, that has to be taken into account, right? But the choices that people make, their jobs, vocations, their activities and hobbies that they like and whatnot, speaks to their inner self and their belief about who they are, right? That tells us a lot, right? So, but understand criminal mindset, okay? So knowing that most street fights and the violence that we see in media mimic sport-based fighting, that's helpful, right? But we have to always train with the awareness that real-world attackers don't adhere to those structures, right? Not everybody fights the same way. Not everybody fights for the same reasons, okay? So your survival training should always include scenarios where you're blindsided, where you're outnumbered, where you're attacked by someone with no regard for fairness, that kind of thing. And this isn't just you heard Sensei say it during a Whiteboard Wednesday, so that's where it stops. I don't need any more. No, right? There's a whole bunch of different kind of things. We could walk around the mandala and discuss different attacker types and how that person throws a punch, right? 4 different attacker mindsets with why they punch and attack the way they do. For a lot of them, it's tied to their build. and physical prowess. Okay. For other ones, other things. Okay. So what do we have? Crate drills that fill in the gaps and all that. Right. This is kind of backwards. Understand criminal intent, and then understanding street fighting and criminal violence. Okay. Studying. What did I say there? Street fighting and criminal violence. Street fighting and criminal violence. You know, what are you going to do when 3 goons surround you and tell you to get in the car because they're going to take you somewhere to leave your body? Well, I guess Sensei, I'm going to die because they won't let me take Saigon, then I'm kind of screwed. Yeah, I guess so. Okay. But studying these things, right? So we need to train for violence without rules, including weapons, multiple attackers, attacks from any angle. This requires a tactical mindset and strategic thinking that prioritizes escape and self-preservation over winning, right? And not getting caught in this fight mindset itself, right? So again, you take this stuff for what it's worth and for what it's given. I can't wait for the comments that end up on the different platforms where somebody like read the art, read the title, and then listened to like 5 minutes or 30 seconds or whatever, and then has a whole bunch of bullshit and stuff to throw out. Anyway, and you don't take my word for it. I only grew up in like the projects in inner city, being attacked a lot, you know, domestic violence. My mom being beaten on a regular basis. Came at me and my brother and 2 sisters. Actually, I don't think he was born yet. My brother and 2 sisters. No, not my brother. Me and my 2 sisters, because my parents got into an argument at one point, and every time that happened, my mom would default to blaming the children for why, whatever, right? And he went to the kitchen and grabbed a butcher knife and came back and threatened to cut us up and drop us in a trash can. And maybe that would solve the problem. She would stop blaming the kids. Right? These are the memories I have of my fond childhood. Okay. So anyway, so kind of wrapping this up, right? So while street fights may look like sport fights, while both may be unpredictable in their own right, real-world violence is a different beast altogether. Right? It's about survival under extreme pressure. Right? It often involves sudden, overwhelming force, or even attempted murder. Okay. So that's what I have for this one. If you think this was valuable and you want to get a little bit more, I invite you to jump into our masterclass on Friday, where we're going to be doing techniques and some training and different things that pull some of these things out. Obviously, we can't do everything in a 75 to 90-minute class, but we're going to pull some of these things out to break the model, to transcend. And part of it is to give students an idea of what they should be aiming for. The second thing should be where students recognize where their training and the techniques and the technique development or proficiency isn't where it needs to be because they either didn't go far enough or they didn't think things through, and I'm expecting, you know, for at least 1 or 2 students to go, I never thought about that. I never thought about it like that. Right? So the point of all this is to stop training stop training for the fight that's in our head, you know, where we're the superhero and he's at a disadvantage and those kind of things. And especially if we're training in ninjutsu. Ninjutsu, the very premise behind ninjutsu, nin, right, enduring, persevering, is to win against or to survive against overwhelming odds. It's not even a fair fight. We're so far back that we've got to do certain things to hit even before we can finish things. Okay? That's it. That's what I have. Anyway, so do me a favor, post in the comments your aha moment, the thing that kind of caught you, the thing you think about, or, you know, whatever, okay? If you have any questions, by all means, as long as they're respectful and whatnot, you can pop those things in there. I tend to laugh at and delete flaming bullshit things that are obvious or obviously coming from somebody with no real world experience, right? I was a federal cop for 7 years. I was an undercover black market and drug investigator, bodyguard, those kind of things. So people want to just look at the fat old bald guy. Yeah, I've got a few days of experience under my belt, so to speak. Okay, so but I'm not going to have that kind of argument with somebody that doesn't, right? Want to argue over theory? Go argue with somebody else, right? Or make your own videos to show that you know what the hell you're talking about. That'd be a better use of your time. But anyway, that's what I have. Hopefully, I'll see you for the Friday masterclass. If not, I'll see you on Kuden on Monday or next week for our next episode of Warriors Whiteboard Wednesday.